Hello, fellow ag nerds. Thanks so much for downloading this episode of the Future of Agriculture podcast. My name is Tim Hamrich, and this is the show for people who are curious about the intersection of where innovative ideas meet practical realities in food production. I'm trying something brand new today. For the first time ever, I think, I'm releasing 2 episodes on the same day. Now, I've trimmed each of these 2 episodes down to only about half of my normal length, so the total time commitment on your part is about the same as a regular week. But if you're a subscriber, you probably already noticed there are 2 today. Now, this is for several reasons, but mostly I just like to keep things fresh and try something new. This isn't something I'm planning on doing on a regular basis, but, maybe occasionally if you all like it. So please make sure you let me know what you think. Both of today's episodes are about farm data. This one you're about to hear is on the economics of farm data with Dr. Terry Griffin, and the next one is on the analytics of farm data with Aaron Gault from Advanced Agrilytics, which I encourage you to listen to after this one. I've been meaning to bring Dr. Terry Griffin onto the show for quite some time now because he's not only well-researched and data-driven, but as you're about to hear, he's not afraid to explore ideas that may be somewhat unconventional or perhaps even in some circles unpopular. Terry is associate professor and cropping systems economist at Kansas State University, where he specializes in farm management and agricultural technology. For his achievements in advancing digital agriculture, he's received the 2014 Pierre C. International Precision Agriculture Young Scientist Award, the 2012 Conservation Systems PrecisionAg Researcher of the Year Award, and the 2010 PrecisionAg Award of Excellence for Researchers. So I don't know if there's any other PrecisionAg Research Award out there, but I'm sure Terry will win that one as well. Terry and I discuss, among other things, how farm data should be valued, some of the nuances of adoption of variable rate technology, and why he doesn't necessarily advise farmers to jump headfirst into joining any sort of a data service. I'm going to drop you into the conversation, though, where Terry's describing what prompted him to want to go back to school for his Ph.D., which of course led him to the work he does today.
So during my master's degree, I was evaluating the profitability of precision agricultural technologies then, back in the 90s. I was working a lot with GIS, the mapping software, geographic information systems, or you can say geographic information sciences. And doing a lot of that work, and I was running into these roadblocks of analyzing yield monitor data and other data that's coming from sensors that we were connecting to GPS units at the time. And there was really no good way of analyzing the data except by inappropriately applying classical statistics to it. So I wanted to gain a skill set to analyze data coming from combines and cotton pickers and other agricultural equipment. And looking around, and Purdue had, it wasn't just a program, it was more of a small group of professors who were working in this area. And that's why I, one, chose Purdue, and 2, wanted to get a PhD, was to empower myself to be able to analyze this data.
And why? I think this is going to get to a kind of a core question we talk about here today. Why did you want to analyze that data so bad?
These sensors are collecting and logging mountains of data, lots of data, more data than we've ever seen before in history. And so it wasn't only the type of data, but it was the amount of data. And farmers were saying, this is great, the maps are great, but I don't know how to handle this data. And researchers were saying the same thing, we don't either. And so there's huge void and opportunity. And that's kind of where I decided to focus on that for the rest of my career, was how do we make use of all this data coming from machinery that is available, and we're not even having to go out and collect it now. Back in the early 90s, we had to make some deliberate action to do so, but now it's there. And we still have this opportunity. And it's amazing in 20 years how little we've progressed with this.
Is part of the question here okay, we think this data could be valuable, but it's not. So we need to sort of figure out how to make the data as valuable as we think it should be.
Yeah. So one of the things that has been tripping up a lot of people when it comes to valuation of farm data is, who are we talking about? So we have winners, we have losers, and most of us in the agriculture community have a farmer hat on, meaning we kind of look at the world through the lens of a farmer and asking the question, how did this benefit the farmer? And that might be the wrong question to ask when we're talking about farm data. I do think that the farmer at the farm level should be a component of this, but not the only player. We have all the way from the venture capitalists chasing this concept of farm data to the multinational companies who are dealing with it, to the startups that we see popping up, and a lot of them are going away on a daily basis, to our local crop consultants, whether they're independent or working for a large ag retailer. I mean, they're all different players in this concept of farm data. And asking who will be the ultimate winners is a really good question. And we shouldn't assume that it's all about the farmer.
And, in some regards, I could see from a farm perspective, it's kind of like, well, it's our data and they are finding these use cases and they're getting all the value from it and we're not getting any of the value. But on the flip side of that, it's like data is only worth what you can do with it. Maybe there's a more eloquent way of saying that, but how do you look at that struggle between how much should a farmer be rewarded for the data or how much should it go to whoever can utilize it?
That's a very interesting debate. I'd kind of like to have a panel of people, and throw out some topics here and see how they respond, but several things on that. One, I've used this example before with mechanized agriculture, okay? So before that, farmers were relying upon animal power to do a lot of the work, and they were subsistent to some degree. They were raising grain, feed it to the livestock, and one day they had the option of getting a tractor. But what does that mean? Well, you can maybe farm more acres in a year, but you also lose some independence, right? So you have to become dependent upon a fuel supplier that you didn't have before when it was just animal power. They lost some independence, became dependent on a fuel supplier. But fast forward a few years, what happened to the animal power farmers? They just eventually went away, right? So it may have been a short-term solution not to adopt mechanized agriculture, but it was not a long-term sustainable decision. And I think that's sort of the same way now. It's given up some independence by sharing farm data with other parties. But, looking forward to the next couple of decades, it's just a matter of time before this concept is ubiquitous. Those who try to remain independent may do so in the short term, but it may not be a long-term sustainable decision. The ability to exclude others from accessing a intangible digital good, such as data, is limited by if it's already been shared. So if a landowner says, hey, I'd like to have a copy of the as-applied fertility data so I can pay for my share, or they may just say, I'd like to have a copy of the yield monitor data for my archive. And a farmer has two choices, and one of them is not to farm that land anymore. And once that data has been shared, the ability to exclude others from accessing it has been greatly diminished. They really have no control over who gets access to it, because all it takes is forwarding an email with an attachment and near costless ability to make copies.
Right. And once it's copied, it's completely out of their control.
It's completely out of their control. So, as an economist, we look at public and private goods. If you remember your Econ 101 classes, a private good is something you own, and it's something you can exclude others from. And then a public good is something that is like national defense. We enjoy it, but we cannot exclude anybody else from also enjoying that national defense. And, where does data fall? It's not either one, really. It's kind of a weird product here we're talking about. And one of the things I think that trips up agriculturalists, whether it's crop consultants and farmers, is that we as humans tend to think of ownership the way we consider a pencil or land or livestock. And that's not a really good litmus test for ownership of data. The rules, the legal aspects of that do not apply to intangible goods like data. And we tend to want to say farmers own data coming from their equipment and farm fields. But in reality, talking to the ag attorneys, when we published on this, Drake University has a journal of agricultural law. And in 2019, we published an article in it, just pointing out that we don't think American law, federal or even any of the states, cover this concept of ownership when it comes to intangible goods like data.
Is there any particular data point or set of data points that you think in general farmers are underutilizing for their own management decisions?
I think about that a lot, and I would like to think so, but maybe not. And the reason is automated guidance has been adopted fairly quickly. It's one of the newer technologies out there. It hasn't been around as long as yield monitors. But those automated technologies have been adopted a lot quicker, partly because they come with new sprayers and tractors and combines. I would say that, variable rate fertility and some of those technologies would be, as you described, as being underutilized. But I also have to keep in mind that successful farm operations know what they're doing. And if they're not adopting some technologies, there's a reason. It may not be profitable for them, or there may not be sufficient human capital to devote to that technology. Variable rate is not necessarily plug and play. It takes some effort. And, whether the human capital is on the farm, being a farm operator or employee, or even, at arm's length, being a crop consultant or ag retailer locally, there may not be the human capital available to devote to making that work for that farm. And I just have to have confidence that farmers are making the right decision for themselves. So I don't know if there's anything that's underutilized, but the variable rate adoption is a lot lower than what we would have expected. And, there's been some debate about, the valuation of that farm data, and it's going to come down to how we use it. And not all farm operators will have that same skill set to make use of it. I do expect ubiquitous variable rate adoption in the future, but I don't expect it in 2021, and I don't expect it with the current set of farm operators we have today. But sometime in the future, I do expect it to become ubiquitous.
And how does that happen? How do the operators get the training they need to utilize these tools?
It's interesting. So in Extension, we offer some workshops on cleaning yield monitor data, which is one of the more tedious things that kind of gets skipped. And we, our researchers, industry, everybody at the table had been trying to automate that tedious process, remove the human from it. Historically, we automate processes that eliminate unskilled labor, ditch digging and that kind of thing, which is good, but it'd be almost better if we replaced human capital that was more expensive, more tedious, dealing with software, cleaning yield monitor data. But there is some work being done in that area. Some companies, I think, are employing the ability to clean yield monitor data in a sophisticated, rigorous way without human intervention. That's becoming real important to what we're doing. One of the things I see with variable rate, I just had a paper written and accepted. It's going to be coming out this spring, in spring of 2021, in the Journal of Applied Farm Economics, which is a relatively new farm management journal out of Purdue University. And a gerontologist and I, her name is Lavana Trawick, she's at the Arkansas Colleges for Health Education. She and I wrote about why farmers do and do not adopt variable rate technology. It goes back to, a lot of farmers may not see it as profitable for them, or they may not have the human capital available on the farm. And so we started investigating the notion of third-party services. And I've been kind of paying attention to some of these offerings, and it seems to be some, debate about the right way of doing variable rate. And it's kind of like everybody saying that everybody else is doing it wrong. Only, my service has the ability to do this right. And, essentially what happens is, if I'm a farmer, I'm just frustrated because if they're not able to make it work, then maybe I'm not either. So I'm just going to wait until the dust settles. So we're seeing, that friction in the service providers right now.
Yeah, I think that I've noticed that with ag tech. It's like everybody else is horrible, and I'm the only one who's got it figured out. And of course, that can't be true in every case.
Right.
You mentioned kind of in some cases variable rate is the right way to go. In other cases, maybe it's not. What are the factors that determine whether a farmer should be adopting it? When is it a no-brainer? Is it have to do with the variability of the farm itself?
It has a lot to do with the variability of the soil and the history of the farm. We could argue, we know what the costs are of doing variable rate. We can, get the maps. We know how much fertility we're going to put on every grid cell or every zone. And we know the cost of application. We know that the fees that we got to pay to the service providers. What we don't know is the benefits, right? Well, in addition to profitability and the cost benefit analysis, economists are concerned about risk management. And a lot of times we assume incorrectly, we assume that farmers are completely risk neutral, meaning that they will swing for the fences every time and try to go for max profit, max yield, just maximize things all the time. And that's just not the case. Farm operators they're not, always businesses. They're humans making this decision, and some are more risk averse than others. They're not the types of folks who take a bunch of gambles all the time. So if I'm really risk averse, I could apply a uniform rate of fertility across the field. And some places I'm probably pretty close to being right. Some places it's going to be clearly wrong. It's kind of like a broken clock is correct twice a day, sort of that analogy. But what if I come up with a variable rate prescription for my field? Does that improve the chances of being right, or do I increase the chances of being wrong everywhere? Well, if I'm really risk averse, then I don't want to pay a fee to increase the probability of being wrong. And so it's going to be the risk preference of the farm operator that's going to influence some of these decisions as well. I get some pushback from people when I give that example, because theoretically variable rate is supposed to be correct everywhere. But, like we're talking about, the different services would provide a different prescription map. Okay, so both of them can't be right if they're both different. And if you bring in a third service provider, it may actually have a third prescription map that would be recommended for that field. And so it's going to depend on a lot of things.
And you've seen that in some cases where you're just better off with the uniform rate?
It possibly, it depends on the variability of the field. And, this concept goes back, Gary Schnicke is on faculty at Illinois, and he had a conference paper back early 90s. He and Jeff Hopkins of this is with USDA now, and they wrote about this. The idea is one is, it's a variable rate, and then you have a extension recommendation uniform rate. And then the third one is sort of an informed uniform rate based upon the grid soil sampling. And, they were doing some break-evens about the amount of variability that was necessary in the field in order for the uniform rate to still be superior to the variable rate.
Terry, I want to give you a chance to leave it open-ended here. Anything you want to address you were either hoping to talk about that I didn't get us to, or anything you want to add on to that we talked about?
Sure. One of the big questions I get from farmers, they'll call and ask me, well, we got all these farm data companies and services, and I just don't know which one to join. I feel all this, pressure that I need to do something now. And I remind them that, if you don't see a clear benefit right now of joining a farm data service, then you shouldn't. It's an economic decision. If the benefits of joining, and when I say joining, that, includes relinquishing control of farm data. If you don't see benefits from doing so immediately, at least benefits that outweigh the cost of doing so, just wait. You're not in a hurry. The reason farmers feel like they're in a hurry is that the farm data services are in a race with each other, and it's a winner-take-all type of race. And so they're trying to build their archive of more farmers, growers, farmers, fields, acres sooner. And those who are able to do so will have a good chance of being the winner. They're in a hurry, so they're trying to push the feeling of hurriedness to the farmer. But farmers, you're not in a hurry. As always, make sure that the benefits outweigh the cost, and if not, you're maybe better off to wait. And eventually, the solution will present itself.
Well, thank you so much to Dr. Terry Griffin for being on the show. I enjoyed that conversation. And make sure you stay tuned for our next episode, which is with Aaron Gault of Advanced Agrilytics, to continue on with similar themes, but a new perspective. You can learn more about Terry's work and read his blog over at www.spaceplowboy.com, which is a great name, and he's also Space Plowboy on Twitter. He's a great follow there as well. But stay tuned for this next episode on farm data analytics with Aaron Gault. Hopefully you've already got it downloaded in the queue, and we'll talk to you then.